Grand Rising, everyone. For Black History Month, today I would like to talk about a powerful and important graphic novel, The March Trilogy, written by Congressman John Lewis. So, this series is a deep dive into Lewis's life, from childhood in a rural Alabama to his pivotal role in the civil rights era, and offers readers a unique emotional perspective on one of America's most defining periods. And I just want to say this series, it was very educational for me when I was reading it when I was younger. It was very important in my life because at the time, I was all of 8 and I didn't know anything about this. So it being a graphic novel made it semi kid friendly for me and my standards. So it really helped me understand what happened during the civil rights era and helped me understand why it's important to learn about my heritage. So in March, Book 1, we're introduced to John Lewis's early life growing up in Troy, Alabama in the 1940s and 50s. This was an important time when segregation was painful. It was a painful part of everyday life. Separate schools, buses, even water fountains, and restaurants. At a young age, Lewis felt the weight of racial discrimination. The book doesn't just show his personal history, it sets the stage for his eventful journey towards activism. And what stands out in this first book is how Lewis starts to develop his sense of justice, largely influenced by his religious upbringing, his faith, and his admiration for Dr. King. It all pushed him to become more involved in the civil rights movement, and he really became one of the more influential figures, standing almost beside Malcolm X and Dr. King. So I just want to say that you can read this, children can read this, in my opinion. But I'd recommend, if you are a parent, you should read it first and determine if it is your child friendly. What stands out in this first book is how Lewis starts to develop his sense of justice, largely influenced by his religious upbringing, and his admiration for Dr. King pushed him to become more involved in the civil rights movement. We see his decision to go to American Baptist College in Nashville, where he learns about the philosophy of nonviolent resistance. Lewis and his peers organize the Nashville sit-ins, where they protest the segregated lunch counters. As we talk about Black History Month, we need to appreciate how these sit-ins were revolutionary acts. They were peaceful protests, but they challenged the status quo in a profound way. And it shows how one person's decision, one group's courage, can ignite a nationwide movement. It's humbling to think about the bravery it took to just sit at a lunch counter and demand equality. So, I've never had to do that. It just makes me feel thankful of how I've been born and where I have been able to get to in life because of what time period I was born in. I couldn't imagine my life in the 1940s or 50s. And in March, Book 2, Lewis and his fellow activists face more intense challenges. This is when we see events like The Freedom Rides. A group of black and white activists rode buses through the South to change segregation of interstate travel. They were met with violent mobs and arrests, yet they pressed on. This book shows how terrifying these moments were, but also it, it goes to show how committed they were to the cause. And it wasn't just black people, it was some other races as well, not just whites, black, yellow, brown, it doesn't matter. They were helping out to trying to get rid of segregation. Another key moment in this book is the 1963 March on Washington. While Lewis's speech at the march is often overshadowed by Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, it is still a pivotal moment. The March on Washington brought together more than 250,000 people, showing the strength of the movement and the growing demand for racial justice. Lewis's participation was a reminder that young people were leading the charge for a change. The violence that Lewis and the other activists faced is heartbreaking to read about. In 1965, during the Selma to Montgomery March, Lewis was brutally beaten by state troopers as he tried to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The images of him lying bloodied on the ground became a strong turning point, galvanizing the nation in support of the movement. And this book really makes you think about the true cost of standing up for justice and how nonviolent resistance was met with such force and brutality. And it just really makes you think how much these activists did just to get to where we are. So, in March Book 3, Triumph and Legacy, we finally see the fruits of the movement's labor. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is passed, and the book shows the impact of that victory. However, the book also touches on the fact that while laws were changing, true equality required ongoing work. The final part of this book also deals with Lewis's transition from an activist to a legislator, showing his commitment to justice continued even after the movement. It's a reminder that although we've come a long way since the 1960s, the fight for racial equality truly is never over. We just need to keep pushing for progress, just as Lewis and his peers did. Now, using a graphic novel to tell this story is especially meaningful for younger generations. It's an approach that is both modern and visually compelling. To wrap up, the March trilogy is an essential part of both understanding the Black history and American history. It's not just about telling one man's story, but also the collective effort of a generation that fought to change the course of history. John Lewis's story, told through this graphic novel, is powerful, inspiring, and most importantly, a call to action as we honor and reflect on the sacrifices that they all made. I hope you all have a blessed day.